make mistake number one, which would be to map your lemma with the patient's arm at their side, but then abduct the arm to do the block. Now, why is that a problem? Remember, we don't want to be medial. When my arm is at my side, my clavicle is fairly horizontal. Okay? As I start to abduct the arm, what happens? It becomes more vertical. As the clavicle becomes more vertical, what does it do? It brings with it the chest wall. As the chest wall comes out lateral, what does it bring with it? The chest wall contents. So if I found my insertion site with my arm at my side, but then I abducted the arm, everything came out lateral except for one thing. My insertion site, it's way too medial. Okay? So that's number one. Now, my insertion site direction endpoint. It never changes. My insertion site is 1 inch down, 2.5 centimeters for those of you who insist on talking metric, but 1 inch down from the midpoint of the clavicle. You ready? Perpendicular to the clavicle. Never, 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 never drop that line along what I call the plane of the patient, because that brings you what? To medial. And if my arm is, and if I make mistakes 1 and 2 at the same time, meaning my arm is at my side, I draw a line along the plane of the patient, abduct the arm to do the block. You see where I found my insertion site is over here. Where I want it to be, it's over here. I'm way too medial. So my insertion site is, and I will repeat this no less than 112 times in the next 10 minutes, I promise you. So let me just say it though. My insertion site for the infraclavicular approach to the breaking places using a nerve stimulator is 1 inch down, 2.5 centimeters, 1 inch down from the midpoint of the clavicle, perpendicular to the clavicle, having mapped my lemma with the patient's arm in the position I'm going to do the block. Let me say it again. 1 inch down from the midpoint of the clavicle, perpendicular to the clavicle, having mapped my lemma with the patient's arm in the position I'm going to do the block. 1 inch down, 2.5 centimeters, 1 inch down from the midpoint of the clavicle, perpendicular to the clavicle, having mapped my lemma with the patient's arm in the position I'm going to do the block. Now my direction is always out lateral to the pulsation of the axillary artery. My direction is always out lateral to the pulsation of the artery. Now, that door was bolted shut 2 seconds ago, and no one will leave this room today until we are all 100% convinced that by putting a needle under the clavicle and aiming it out lateral to the artery, that we're outside the thorax. You have to believe that to your very core. You have to believe that to know that this block is safe. So let's look at this. Now, I know this is a drawing. It has certain limitations, but whatever we can say, that if I put a needle here, 1 inch out from the midpoint of the clavicle, perpendicular to the clavicle, aiming out lateral to the pulsation of the artery, putting a needle here, aiming it here, then I'm outside of there. Yeah, okay, but David, really, that's a drawing. You can almost do anything with a drawing. I watch cartoons. I'm about 80% convinced. Well, let's look at a skeletal model. Would everyone agree that if I put a needle where? 1 inch out from the midpoint of the clavicle, perpendicular to the clavicle, aiming it lateral to the pulsation of the artery, putting a needle here, aiming it here, then I'm outside of there. Hey, you know what? I'm starting to believe, about 92% convinced. What's my insertion site? He said it's 1 inch out from the midpoint of the clavicle, perpendicular to the clavicle, aiming it lateral to the pulsation of the artery. Let's learn something new, that my needle angle is at or about a 45-degree angle to the chest wall. My needle angle is about a 45-degree angle to the chest wall. At or about. I'll talk more about that at or about in a few minutes, but would everyone just buy, let's just say 45 degrees. Would everyone agree that if I put a needle here, 1 inch out from the midpoint of the clavicle, perpendicular to the clavicle, aiming it lateral to the pulsation of the artery, at a 45-degree angle to the chest wall, then putting the needle here, aiming it here, I'm outside of there. Yeah, I'm about 98% convinced. Unfortunately, that's not 100%. So I want everybody to give yourself a little bit of room, okay?